Hey girls, so today we are going to be looking into chapter 21. Chapter 21 should not take us a very long time. We can kind of speed through chapter 21. Um, it's kind of about social life during the 1920s. This is where you see like the flapper, um, the nation split over prohibition. We're going to look at the Harlem Renaissance, Louis Armstrong, and kind of just some other key figures of American life. So rather than, having a quiz for chapter 21, I wanted to do a one pager assignment. Attached is an example of the one pager, but let's see, just so you know, for example, this is what it would look like, right? So you're going to be assigned a topic. Your topic will have textbook pages that you are responsible for reading and then translating into an appealing one page like worksheet basically. For example, this was American Leisure from the Progressive Era. Um, we have little text boxes telling us about each part of the subcategory that this person was assigned. With images, you are also responsible for providing a YouTube link for information that you found, or a link to an article or a link to a poem that you had found while you were doing your work. But that's all mentioned in the rubric, which is right here. So basically, right, this is the criteria for your project. And then down here I have everyone's assignment for the topic that they should be translating into this one pager. So with that being said, I'm going to give you guys an intro into the Roaring Twenties. So let's take a look. So here's a poem by Langston Hughes. I want you guys to read this poem by Langston Hughes on your own, and I want you to make a comment on Edmodo. And it doesn't have to be a paragraph. I just want you to explain what this poem does say about America. It can be 2 sentences, 3 sentences, whatever you want. But comment on Edmodo with a reaction to this poem, and what it says about America. The 1920s. So war brought change to society. Okay, we knew this. We knew this as we saw, with the politics of the Roaring Twenties. Right. So this is the place to be. After 1922, everybody's moving to the city. People from rural farmland are moving to the city for jobs in the factories. New York is the largest city, followed by Chicago and Philadelphia. The city is a place of competition and of change, right, with competitive businesses and, the introduction of the automobile. The cities are rapidly changing and becoming even more populated. There's more toleration of drinking, gambling, and casual dating. The 18th Amendment prohibits the manufacture, the sale, and the transportation of alcohol. Progressives thought that too much drinking led to the abuse of women and children. We saw this in the Progressive Era. We see that the women create the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and the Volstead Act establishes a prohibition bureau in the government. Speakeasies, right? So they're going to have to find a way to get around this. Speakeasies are hidden saloons and nightclubs. You guys might have heard that word now while we're in this quarantine. You might have heard people talking about speakeasies, since bars and restaurants are closed and things like that. You needed a password and a card to enter. A bootlegger, think of a bootleg movie, right? It's like a copyrighted movie. Bootleggers are people who smuggle alcohol into the country, and this leads to organized crime. All right, we're gonna look at some mobsters like Al Capone. He's from Chicago, New York, right? That was Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello. All right, here's some of the gangsters. And basically, they would smuggle goods into the country and make a profit off of it and kill people. Fundamentalism. This is a literal interpretation of the Bible. Think about how people can either interpret the Constitution or they're strict constructionalists. All right, think about that with fundamentalism. This is when people interpret the Bible word for word. Revivalists like Aimee Semple McPherson and Billy Sunday began to preach against evolution Hollywood style. The Scopes monkey trial. So Tennessee outlaws the teaching of evolution. They say that this goes against what God said in the Bible. On the second day there was grass. I don't know. I haven't read Genesis or Genesis in a really long time. But American Civil Liberties unions, they pay John T. Scopes to teach evolution, and they offer to defend him. Clarence Darrow is hired to defend Scopes, and William Jennings Bryan, who is a fundamentalist, is the prosecutor. So this is super interesting, girls, because now we're looking at how society shapes what the kids learn in the classroom, right? This has always been a struggle for religion and with history, as they oftentimes contradict one another. So basically, what happens is overnight this becomes like national news. And Darrow called Bryan as an expert on the stand on the Bible. Everybody was waiting for this, and so basically, they questioned him, and he did not back down. Ultimately, Bryan admits that the Bible might be interpreted in different ways. In spite of this, Scopes was found guilty, and he was fined $100. The Tennessee Supreme Court later changes the verdict on a technicality, but the law on teaching against evolution remained in effect. Flapper women of the 20s. So strings of beads, felt hats, short dresses, and a lot of short hair, right? These go against the conventional appearance of women. Women are smoking in public, drinking in public. They talk openly about sex, and they dance in public. These are things that were frowned upon. Before the 20s. Women are really just changing the rules, and they begin to view marriage as a partnership. Prior to that, marriage was necessary for a woman. A woman depended on her husband to provide for her, and in return, she maintained the household. But now they're actually viewing marriage as a partnership between two equal individuals. A double standard is a set of principles granting greater sexual freedom to men than women. So basically, at this point, we're going to see that women start challenging the idea that, regardless of perhaps maybe her husband's infidelity, a woman has to remain true to her husband, remain loyal. We're seeing now that women are exploring dating life and enjoying more personal freedom than they had ever before. These are some pictures of flappers. I'm sure that you've seen, maybe some of you wear a flapper like growing up for Halloween. You see the short hairstyles, the much shorter dresses, right? So the booming economy provides jobs outside of the home for women. And these types of jobs changed once men came home from war. Women are rarely in management positions, and they earn a lot less than men do. Birth rates are dropping because women don't feel as rushed to get married and have children. Birth control is more available to women. Housework is easier due to, electronics, things like that, the vacuum, right? Children are spending more time in school, and teens begin to spend less time with their families. Think about it. If you're on a farm, where can you really go? In the city, you have access to public transportation. You can get from A to B much quicker. And so the teens are going to go out exploring, right? You see a lot more people on the street in New York City than you do in, Bucks County. I don't know. All right. Fads of the 20s. So the Charleston, that was an energetic dance craze that swept the nation. Flagpole sitting, some crazy cool cat kids sat on top of flagpoles for days, and they thought that that was real fun. Education in the 20s, nearly 4 million. Yo, buddy, what are you doing? Sorry, my puppy was being annoying. 4 million attend high school. Teachers are teaching immigrant children to speak English, and taxes to support schools increase, right? Because more kids are going to school. More than 60% of homes have a radio, and magazines are published. These include, Time Magazine. These are some images that are on the front of these magazines. Every home had a radio. That was pretty much how they got the news. All right. We have games like crossword puzzles, baseball, right? Babe Ruth becomes a major phenomenon, and the country goes through the Pharaoh phase as King Tut was discovered by Howard Carter in 1922. Charles Lindbergh makes the first nonstop solo flight across the Atlantic in the Spirit of St. Louis. And Amelia Earhart is the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. In terms of entertainment, the first major movie with sound was The Jazz Singer. Disney's first animated film with sound, Steamboat Willie, was released. George Gershwin mixes traditional music with jazz. Georgia O'Keeffe paints the grandeur of New York. Sinclair Lewis calls this era the Jazz Age, and he wrote The Great Gatsby and This Side of Paradise. Edna St. Vincent Millay writes about youth and independence from traditional custom, which is exactly what we're seeing during the 20s. We are seeing the youth and maybe perhaps previously marginalized members of society like women, immigrants, African Americans. We are pretty much seeing these groups become more independent and steer away from the traditional customs that had bound them before. Ernest Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises in A Farewell to Arms. Hemingway criticizes the glorification of war, and he says that um, he writes about how war is glorified, but in reality, it's absolutely brutal. Happiness in Intelligent People is the rarest thing I know. Ernest Hemingway. Crap. Where's the rest of my stuff? All right. Let's see. Hold on. Let's see. Here we go. Harlem Renaissance. Okay. Harlem is vicious. Modernism, band clash, vicious the way it's made. Can you stand such beauty so violent and transforming? This is a poem about the Harlem Renaissance. This was the name given to the period from the end of World War One through the middle of the 1930s Depression, where a group of talented African American writers, thinkers, and artists produced a sizable contribution to American culture. Um, Into Bondage by Aaron Douglas. Um, so most African Americans remained in the South for nearly 50 years after the Civil War. Um, there were plenty of reasons for blacks to leave the South. However, there was little economic advantage to moving up north. We know that in the South, blacks were still discriminated against. However, we also know that in the North, it's not like discrimination was completely obsolete. It's still true today. With the outbreak of World War One, the war ends up generating new opportunities for industry. Much of the existing labor supply leaves for work, right? Because people are going to war, and the immigrant labor pool evaporates because xenophobia and nativism became such big philosophies during and after World War One. So the Great Migration, which congregated black populations in northern cities like Chicago, New York, okay, takes place. We are going to see that Harlem becomes a center for emergence of African American culture in the United States. Okay, this is Harlem. Northern city life proves that It's exhilarating and very troubled from World War One and forward. Um, we're going to see that the North provides greater educational, political, and social opportunities. Um, but rising Northern racism leads to strict residential segregation. This causes overcrowding, rundown conditions, and artificially high rents. The Harlem Renaissance became a symbol and a point of reference that everybody looks back on. Um, this becomes a racial focal point for blacks as the world um, all over the world. It remains a time for racial kind of to put aside racial tensions and to allow culture to really boom in the United States. Um, this encourages a new appreciation of folk roots and culture. Um, Common themes that we're going to see emerge are alienation, marginality, the use of folk material, the use of the blues tradition, and problems of writing for an elite audience. Um, we saw that the Harlem Renaissance was a literary movement and that it was also a musical movement um, with, well, more of an art music movement with paint and, drama, theater, music. And here's some musicians of the Harlem Renaissance. They include Bessie Smith, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Cab Calloway. Jazz Age. Where is it? So that's pretty much all I have here. And then after the Harlem Renaissance, we are done chapter 21. Let's see. This is what I want. Okay. So in 1890, between 1890 and 1920, 2 million African Americans migrate from rural southern states to the northern cities, hoping to find better opportunities and less discrimination. What happens? We end up seeing more discrimination. In 1910, the National Association for the NAACP is founded. We looked at that. In 1912, James Weldon Johnson's influential novel Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man is published. Okay, let's move a little bit more forward. Okay. In 1919, the 369th Infantry Regiment, a highly decorated unit made up entirely of African American soldiers, returns from World War I to a hero's welcome in Harlem. This is incredible. In 1990, we see that during the Red Summer of Hate, African Americans react angrily to widespread lynchings and other violence directed against them, with race riots occurring in cities such as Chicago, Washington, D.C. Langston Hughes' great poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, is published in Crisis. Keep moving forward. We're going to see Bessie Smith, Marcus Garvey. We're going to see music with Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington. Okay. Okay, this is pretty much just, I'm going to post this into your, Zora Neale Hurston. Oh, I love her. She enters Barnard College on a scholarship studying anthropology. If you guys have ever read her book, Their Eyes Are Watching God, it is incredible. Okay, and I'm going to post this just so you guys have this to access. If your project, that's the end for chapter 20. If your project is, the Harlem Renaissance, feel free to use that timeline. However, you should just pretty much stick to your textbook pages that I had assigned to you. You also have a quiz. I've tried to post it like 4 times, but it keeps deleting because Edmodo hates me and I don't know how to work technology. So that's that. But please let me know if you have any questions about the one pager. I hope it doesn't stress you guys out. I hope it's actually just like an easier way for you guys to submit something and get a project grade for it. So please let me know if you have any questions about that. I understand it might not be completely clear as you've never done it before, but I'm hoping that the example one helps. So let me know if you need any help. That will be due on Wednesday, and I'm gonna try to post your quiz again, but I don't know what's going on. Enjoy the rest of your day, girls, and I will post again on Wednesday.